I want to welcome to the show Christy Matthews, and she again is running for. She is the youngest woman running for the the state house in Connecticut history. Christy, how are you? Thank you for joining us. I can hear you loudly and clearly. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So you're running. You are the youngest woman running. And before we talk about your policies and before we talk about everything else, let me ask you about why are you running at such an early age? How old are if I mean I know we're not supposed to ask, but please tell us, how old are you?
So I'm 21 years old. I'm not even finished with college yet, and I've sort of had a very interesting set of life experiences that put me on the path of progressivism and of political awareness and activism. And I was fortunate enough to be included in YP4, which is by People for the American Way. It's Young People for. It's a young progressive youth leadership program that helps you sort of build a blueprint for social change. And that our summit in DC is kind of what spurred me to decide that I really needed to step up. You know, there's never going to be a right time in your life to run,
Okay.
and you know the time was now. If not us, who? If not now, when?
Well, yeah, no, that's an awesome quote. I love that. And I love the fact that you're willing to take this leap. So tell me, at the age of 21, you haven't finished college. Let me just get to the question that I think a lot of people will, hell, I don't know if a lot of people, but I want to ask, what could you possibly, and I'm not saying this in a condescending way. I'm asking this because I'm sure you've been asked this also. What could you possibly bring to the position at the age of 21? You're not even out of college yet. So what would make you as a person that young qualified or valuable in that seat?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think we talk a lot about intersectionality and the way that issues in life affect each other. And I think ageism is actually a very large issue in terms of our politics. So we need to make sure that we have young people who can come in and speak on behalf of young people from direct experience. So, you know, issues of student debt and student loan reform, that's something that I have personally experienced. And beyond that, you know, I grew up in a divorced family, and it was a very abusive family. And by the time I was 17, I ended up moving out and living with my grandparents for a little while, and then I ended up pretty housing insecure, technically homeless, and working, you know, on that minimum wage that you can't live on, that you really can't live on. And that's something that, you know, when I step up to speak and say, you know, we need to defend those minimum wage workers, those low skills, no skills, quote unquote, that's like the economics term for it. Because, you know, it's not just college students, it's single moms, it's, you know, disproportionately people of color, it's, you know, so many. I think the statistics on it, the last time I checked the labor, the Bureau of Labor, was, I think it was over 80% of all people working a minimum wage were over 25. So, you know, like these are all parts of my life. You know, these aren't just arbitrary like thoughts on an economics chart or part of somebody's political science book. This is my lived reality. So these issues that are so pressing and so heated of, you know, I'm also openly a queer woman, like gender wise. So, you know, all these things of LGBTQI rights, women's rights, you know, freedom of choice, the minimum wage, you know, student loan reform, and all these different things. It's part of me. It's a part of my experience.
And I agree with you. Let me ask it this way: how often are you confronted with that type of ageism in this race so far? Were you surprised by it, or was it, or have people really been supportive around the board of your candidacy at such a young age?
I think things have been moving so quickly in terms of the candidacy that there hasn't really been a lot of time for people to really aggressively attack my age yet, although, you know, there's still time.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. All right. So then let's move into the issues, because I am fascinated with how young you are. I do remember 21, even though it was many years ago. But I do remember having something to contribute to the conversation at 21 and not yet knowing or having the avenue to run for office to do something of the magnitude that you're doing. So one, we want to applaud you for just jumping out there at this age and using your wealth of experience and your life, the things that you've come through as a platform, as a means of giving voice to other people's issues. So the questions that I asked weren't meant to be condescending, but really just to kind of explore your experience in terms of how young you are. Now, on the issues, I heard you mention intersectionality, and that's something that we talk about on our show a lot. I don't like to just say it without, kind of unpacking it for our audience. But from your perspective, why is the conversation of intersectionality important, particularly in this 2016 race, when and even though you're running on a state level and you're not yet running against a Republican for that seat, but in this race, it seems to be a competition between people who want to focus on intersectionality and identity politics and those nuanced conversations versus people who really don't even want to don't want to hear about it. Like, they're just completely oblivious to any type of concern. So why do you feel like it's important, and how does it play into your campaign?
Well, in the words of Justin Trudeau, because it's 2016, we can't be stuck in the past anymore where we ignore the fact that, race and class and gender and education and religion all interplay so heavily into each other. So when we look at the people who are disenfranchised and living on the fringe of society, we have to understand the path that it took to get us to where we are, that, special groups have special interests, and we need to be able to, if not speak to them, listen to them and understand the experiences that we haven't had for ourselves, and make sure that we incorporate the voices of those who, were not a part of those communities, that we make sure, I don't know how I want to put this. I want to make sure that I'm somebody who listens, and I think the biggest thing that I understand more and more as I go on in the campaign is that there are so many parts of reality that we're all experiencing, and there's no way that one person is capable of being competent in all of them. And if you want to make sure that you end the systematic injustices that, keep so many people at the bottom and so many people at the top, you need to make sure that you're listening, that you're cognizant, that you're making sure all these things that work together can be solved together, because otherwise you're just going to be putting Band-Aids on bullet holes.
Okay, let's dive into this concept of intersectionality a little deeper then. And not to, anything else that you want to talk about, please feel free. But I'm just curious about this intersectionality conversation because I do believe in the need to recognize the different corners that people exist on, right? I don't want to be redundant with intersections, but people have different experiences. So you have people who are women, who are women of color, who are LGBTQ women of color, and then you have people who are LGBTQ women of color and in poverty, or they may have special needs, or wherever intersection that they exist on. Let me ask you, in the context of your campaign, where do you put priorities? Do you feel like you can place your priorities on all of these issues, or do you feel like when you get to the State House, you're going to have to drill down on a particular issue? And if so, what would be that issue?
I think probably the most pressing issue is probably poverty, because I think that's the thing that sort of keeps people, oppressed, very, very largely oppressed socially, because if you can't lift yourself up out of poverty, you can't lift yourself up through education because of our current educational system. You can't lift yourself up through the workforce because, all of these different factors of, not being able to present well enough, or not being able to walk through the same path that it requires in order to get into an upper leadership position in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's probably the number one thing. But I also would like to kind of separate from that all of the issues that we look at from now on, I think we need to look at them with an intersectional lens. We have to make sure that we're seeing, when we're talking about immigration, the ways that also affects our economy, and the way that affects our jobs, and the ways that affects poverty, and then the way that also affects our criminal justice system. We can't be one-dimensional anymore. It's not a functional way to fix our society.
I was hoping you would continue talking. I actually agree with you 100% on that. And I'm looking for my lame clap track, but I just want to applaud you for that. I like what you said, that every issue, regardless of the issue, we need to take a moment, if not several moments, and consider the different intersections of how different people will be affected by said policy. And I like the reason, because if no other reason, it's 2016. It's time for us to stop looking in a one-dimensional lens, because people have different experiences and we have to meet them where they are. So then let's go one step further. Let's talk about intersectionality in terms of Black Lives Matter, in terms of poverty and the competition. It seems like there's a competition then between matters of race and matters of economics. And you seem to be well versed on these types of issues. And mind you, I don't know exactly in Connecticut on the state level how pressing of an issue that will be every day or maybe once in your term there, but you really are shedding some insight on a conversation that I think is worthwhile. So let's just go off here in terms of the competition that seems to exist between people of color, Black Lives Matter, and a conversation on economics. Where do you find the balance? Because there are a lot of Black people who are saying, we don't have time to worry about the economics right now because people are dying in the streets. But then you have other people who are saying, I can't pay my rent, and if I can't pay my rent, then I'm more prone to get in trouble with the law or just to be out on the streets. So how do you find in your mind, where is the balance in these competing forces, particularly when you're dealing with this intersection between race and economics?
So I think a big part of racial issues and poverty are, as implied by intersectionality, very deeply connected.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're thinking about, all of this crime and violence, that's a direct result of poverty. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to go rob a store. I think that sounds like a good idea. That isn't something that just sounds like a good idea. It comes from desperation. It comes from hopelessness. It comes from hunger. It comes from fear. And the only way that we can conquer that is by making sure that we're uplifting our Black and brown brothers and sisters and making sure that their communities are getting the special attention that they need due to our deep history of inequality in this nation. Mm-hmm. So I think that's my ultimate answer to that.
Somebody's calling you in the middle of our interview. Whoever that is, tell them we're having a great conversation.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave that one alone. I agree with you. I agree with you, and I kind of want to dig deeper and deeper into this because
yes, please.
I'm just fascinated, right? You are a non-Black person, right?
I'd say so.
You are a woman, and I'm just curious in terms of the type of interactions then that you have, your experience, your personal experience in this fight for equality, for raising the minimum wage. I see that you fight for the environment. I see some of your issues are you're fighting for gun control. You have an entire range of issues that you're fighting for. And I guess the thing that comes to mind to me in listening to you talk is that you have, this is what I want to ask you. Where are you drawing this from? Where does your source, where have you studied? Where is it all experience? Is it your education? Where is your source for all of these issues that you're ready to fight right now at the age of 21?
Well, I think a big part for me is that I've always been somebody who just engages with people socially and tries to learn from narrative and from story. That's just been my preferred learning method my entire life. So, whenever I have like a friend who's experiencing some kind of hardship, I always try to think of things in terms of root causes. I try to break down what things could mean on a deeper social level and how we got from something as simple as, like in high school, and again, because I'm 21, this is still relevant to me. In high school, I would have friends who would get in trouble for cutting classes, and, they would be having a really hard time making sure they were keeping up with their workload. And, we would talk about it because I would be going through a very similar thing, and it would be, oh, I had to work, all these extra hours this week to help my mom pay the bills, and, I had to make sure that I was taking care of my little brother because my mom is working extra hours this week, and I'm really frustrated and I'm angry and I don't want to be in class right now. And that kind of comes into why I also think that we need to make sure that our schools and our criminal justice system is more of a mental health system. That we're caring for the needs of children and of members of our society who aren't being cared for by their families. So, I also think YP4 was definitely very massively influential into helping me understand the Black Lives Matter movement. But even before that, it's kind of like it just makes sense to me. I think maybe just as a woman, and I know that again, it isn't my experience to speak to, so I don't really know what it's like to be a Black person, obviously. But I can think of it as, if you were to go into a battered women's shelter, you wouldn't go in and say, "Hey, all lives matter,"
Right.
because we're taking time right now to speak to battered women. If they had the slogan, "Hey, women's lives matter," nobody would come in and say all lives matter. We're speaking to a specific group that has a specific history. So, I've always been, an avid reader, a big fan of history, especially U.S. history, and I'd like to think that probably is what also helped contribute to my understanding of it on a more systematic level.
I mean, because you definitely have the language, right? You definitely have the conversation, right? And you're very fastidious with your words. You took time in that last exchange and made sure that you covered your bases, right? And I admire that, especially at the age of 21. And so let's talk about a few other things here. Your race. Who are you up against on the Democratic side? And tell me about what distinguishes you from that candidate.
So I'm running against Laura Bartok. She's a former campaign manager for the former incumbent who lost his race to the current incumbent of the seat, which is a little complicated, I know. And then we also may have another person coming into the race, so it might actually be three of us in the primary. But I think what distinguishes me from this person is just sheer passion and energy and willingness to admit the areas where I'm not strong in, and the commitment to work harder to make sure that I fill those gaps in whatever knowledge or capacities that I'm lacking. And this is a very emotionally invested campaign for me because I'm speaking to issues that, again, have directly affected my lives and the lives of my community. And, I think my experience is a little bit more reflective of the general Bristol experience than maybe perhaps anyone else's is, because we have 4 schools that are at or below the poverty line. We have a lot of kids that get in trouble and have a hard time in school and who don't think they can go to college or are worried about paying for college. And I see so much of the people that I meet on a daily basis in myself, and I think that when we interact, they see a little bit of themselves in me. And I think that's something that distinguishes you, and it's all about compassion. The biggest thing is just compassion.
Okay. I can dig that. Actually, and I agree with you. But listening to you talk, listening to the battle that you're facing, I guess my next question really is about what type of support do you have? What is your campaign like? What type of resources do you have? Are you in a good position for this fight? And where do you go from here?
I think we're doing really well right now. We have an amazing team behind us. I have the most amazing campaign manager. I think I've called her at 2 a.m. at least 3 times this week to just go over different ideas that I've been having about, best practices in terms of moving forward and strategy and covering our issues and making sure that we're well rehearsed for any kind of speech opportunity. And we also have a fantastic consulting agency, which is the Vinci Group, and they actually work on U.S. Congressman John Larson's campaign. So they certainly know what they're doing. They're very competent staff and among some of the most brilliant, energized people I have ever had the pleasure to work with.
Awesome. And that's, so the things that are sticking out the most to me about our entire conversation, because it really is just me getting to know you and my audience getting to know you, and the way the internet is set up. There's a lot of help that can be thrown your way, even from people who are not in your district, not in your state. But the thing that stands out the most to me about you is quite obvious to everyone that you have a wonderful future ahead of you. And I love what you stand for. I love the fact that you are approaching everything through the lens of trying to identify with someone else's experiences, and trying to find where they are. I think that that really says volumes about the way our future can go. And at the risk of sounding like a song, I believe the children are our future. At the risk of that, I really appreciate someone your age taking that leap. But then more than just your age, someone that has the patience to think about the differences and the uniquenesses and the way everyone experiences America differently. If we had more politicians who are 2 or 3, 4, 5 times your age, maybe not 5, but 3 or 4 times your age, who would take that kind of time, I think we would have a lot more problems solved. And maybe we're just waiting for your generation to come in and lead the way. So this is what I want you to do before I let you go. I want you to tell my audience, anyone that you've convinced, actually, no, I want you to convince my audience. Tell them, 1, why they should support you, and then 2, how they can support you.
You know what? I actually am going to put this out to a little bit of a broader message of support. So I've gone ahead on Facebook and put together a Young Progressive Candidates and Elects Facebook group. And anybody, including your audience, who's considering running, is currently running, is welcome to look it up and join. We currently have, and I'm going to read off of a list, several U.S. congressional candidates: Alex Law, Alex Singer, Bao Nyagun, Lucy Flores, Peter Jacob, and Tim Canova. And Tim Canova is actually running for the seat that Debbie Schultz has right now, our favorite person in the DNC. So, you know, help support not just me, but support all of us. Support this movement that young progressives right now and myself are putting together, because we're not just in this for ourselves. Like, win or lose our races, we're trying to build a movement. You know, we're waging small battles in a much larger war of systematic injustice. And we're not just supporting each other in a completely unprecedented way through the internet. We're willing to support you. So if you can give us a few dollars to help our campaign, I have $3,500. I only need $5,000 to qualify for a state election grant. Please, by all means, my website is www.electmatthews.com, ELECTMATTHEWS. It's also on my Twitter, and, you know, please get in touch. Become part of this. Don't defer to someone else.
Let me. Okay, so Alex Singer, Alex Law, Lucy Flores, Alex Singer, Alex Law, they've been on the show already. We're reaching out to Lucy Flores and Tim Canova. He should be on next week, hopefully. So you're in good company, and I love that you spun it and sent it over to them, saying that this is a small movement, but it's a worthy movement. We're all about supporting progressives. We're definitely about fighting back against the machine. When do you need that last $1,500 by?
Ideally by the end of March.
By the end of March. Okay, so you know what? I would say give us that link. Shoot me that link on Twitter. I want to share that link, and I want my producers to share it in our chat room. And I want people to go to their websites. Really all you have right now is you had a chance to hear her voice, to see her face, and see her passion. She communicated that well. But go to her website, engage with her on Twitter, ask her questions, and if she convinces you, then you do whatever you feel like you can do to help push young progressives. And we're definitely going to get more on the show. So, Christy, listen, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to tell my audience before I know you have to go?
Go Democrats.
Okay. All right. That's fine. We can do that. Thanks so much for joining. We're not, I'm going to be honest with you. We're not really huge Democrat fans right now. We are really huge progressive fans. So we're going to support progressive Democrats. And, but I knew what you meant. I'm sure my audience knows what you mean, especially by what you said throughout this entire interview. Really appreciate you coming on. So listen, send me those links. I'll tweet them out. We'll share them in our chat room, and please let us know what we can do to help you in the future. Okay?
Absolutely. Let me take that back. Go progressives. Go progressives, especially young progressives.
Young progressives. Go progressives. And you know what? And then if the Democrats can get right and we get these young progressives in there, then maybe one day everyone can proudly say, go Democrats again. So
Absolutely.
that's my thing. I'm sorry, you just kind of crossed over into my little wheelhouse because as soon as you're gone, I'm going to talk about some Democrats. So that's all. Listen,
no, that's okay. You know, it's all about semantics. It's all semantics. Words are so important.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Christy Matthews. You're not related. Hold on. You're not by any way related to Chris Matthews, are you?
No, unfortunately, but it would be great to get on the show.
Okay. All right. Not a problem. All right. So thanks so much for joining us, and we definitely will do whatever we can to help you out.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have been here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Folks, the phone lines.